So after the absolute failure that was X-Men Origins Wolverine, Fox had rethought what they were going to do going forward with the X-Men franchise. Ultimately, kind of going on an extra idea that they were going to possibly do if Origins Wolverine was going to be successful and its possible follow-up Magneto. Being that they decided they weren't going to do that, they decided to just go ahead with that. They decided to just go ahead with the idea to make a movie version of the First Class comic. The first, class of the X-Men, the original X-Men, kind of their adventures in the early days is a very fun concept. To go back to the younger versions of Storm and Jean Grey and Cyclops, maybe giving them some more actual character development instead of the much they had in previous movies. Of course, the director Matthew Vaughn had some different ideas, and alongside the screenwriters, mainly Jane Goldman, they kind of had a similar idea to the First Class, but it kind of changed the characters and to change what exactly was going on there. Mainly to try and fit it into the original movies. Less so an adaptation of that comic, and more a prequel to the first three movies that will kind of expand the characters and help you learn these characters more than we previously knew about them. It goes back directly to the first shot of the first movie, that we only kind of vaguely got an idea of what was kind of going on there and what Magneto was going through. And through this film, it really expands into more who Magneto is as a person, what he really felt and what came about his experiences during the Holocaust. And more importantly, thanks to the main villain, mainly thanks to the main villain Sebastian Shaw, who was kind of with the Nazis at around that point, trying to find more mutants that were like him. Shaw, of course, being played by Kevin Bacon, is a lot different than the Shaw in the comics, but it kind of exudes this, Bond villain feel to him, and it's perfect, because in this film, when we see grown-up Magneto, he's very much like the more recent modern Bonds, this more, gritty, more take on it. Michael Fassbender is fantastic as young Magneto in this. We really get to see what Magneto was like as a young dude. And it really helps you understand Magneto as a character. It fully goes into why he does what he does in the movies, more or less. But it does show you that there are good sides to him, and helps you grow to almost side with him, but not fully. Because again, in these beginning parts of the movies, we also get to see the more luxurious lifestyles of Charles Xavier. The fantastically casted James McAvoy is a great young Patrick Stewart. There are a few actors that I would pick to be a younger version of well-known older actors, and James McAvoy is absolutely young Patrick Stewart. Lesser so in the beginning, but he really grows to be this wise teacher, and you can see that in these beginning parts of this, as he does have that caring nature to him, as we see him have this kind of brother-sister relationship with Raven, that being Mystique. Jennifer Lawrence is Mystique in this, and they retcon the idea that they've known each other their entire lives. This is kind of strange, because we don't really get anything from the two of them when they're with each other in the movies. But the really cool part about this movie is not only does it kind of show you the beginnings of why that eventually came to be as this movie goes on, but it helps humanize this character, very much so. Mystique is a very different character. She is here into the future, and that's perfectly fine. A lot of the changes of these characters they have in this, whether it be a lot more of Magneto's good side, a much younger, ready to get it fucking on Professor X, and a much more emotional and actually talkative Mystique, it feels perfectly fine, because by the end of the movie, these characters really go through these arcs that help them place where they would be by the point of the first movie. And not in a whiplash kind of way of, whoa, you just had to force them into the way they were. They naturally progress these characters very well. There are lots of ways you can fuck up a prequel by just having it be very obvious yeah, I know, of course these characters are going to be fine. But they develop these characters into almost different people. Similar enough that you can sense that these are the same characters, but you get a much different look at these characters. And it's especially true when you get to the relationship of these three. You really get to see Raven, Mystique, decide on who she wants to be throughout the film because of the influences of these two characters, and especially those two characters' influences on each other. You can really sense that they have a bond. They are like brothers to each other. That's what Magneto says specifically. And due to the fact that they work so well together, it's very clear that they are better with each other than against each other. But due to their core beliefs, that just can't happen. And that's the biggest tragedy of X-Men. It's like you see that there. You know that they are just so close friends and they're great with each other. But that just can't happen. And that's how it feels by the end of the film. Of course, as Magneto is grown up, he goes to trying to find where Shaw is. He meets a few old Nazi contacts that Shaw happened to have, and he slowly finds his way to him. Right as, of course, Professor X is contacted by this movie's version of Mariah McTaggart. We saw her last in 3. Very different actress and very different character. Her only real point is this beginning part. She being a CIA agent, at least in this part of the timeline, tries to spy on some secret hidden shit that would go on, especially with Shaw, and she finds out, Shaw has a big group of mutants with him. He has Emma Frost, who we saw a not version of her in X-Men Origins Wolverine. There was just a character named Emma that they tried to be Emma Frost. I tried looking up why this is the way it is. There's no real clear reason. I absolutely feel that the writers had to know that she was in the previous movie, but they were like, fuck no. She's in this one, and this is a much better version of her. Even if she's not in enough of the film to really show off how cool that Emma Frost is, and unfortunately we never really get that. This is much more faithful than, she got diamond skin, I guess. He also has with him Typhoon, just a kind of a hurricane guy that's also a lesser character, so he can be placed wherever, and Azazel, who in the comics, and also probably in this franchise, Nightcrawler's dad, so he has the same kind of power and the same kind of look. Because the US government kind of finds out that mutants are a thing. They get very confused, so they kind of tell them to get locked up. But luckily, one cool dude who's just known as the Man in Black, we don't really get to know this guy's real name, but thanks to him, our main characters are brought into a nice little environment, and they're allowed to kind of go around and find some mutants that may be able to help them. With help of Cerebro, who in this is built by Beast. It's a very quick line in the first film. I understand why they totally forgot it. The fact that Magneto does specifically say that Cerebro was built by him and Magneto, but it's a detail that many probably would forget, so it doesn't really mess up with the film all that much. I also would argue, due to things we kind of later find out, due to the timeline being different, it's a thing I'll get to later, but I think there is a reason why it isn't necessarily a plot hole, especially due to the very clear difference in appearance of this Cerebro and the original Cerebro, that maybe that one was built by the two of them. So, I'm just saying. This one's more like the original, more like a little computer that they can just kind of find mutants on, almost like an alert. So because of that, they get the new First Class, which, as much as it would make sense to have Professor X have the group that he said was his first few students, and I would have been fine with that. Which again, he could just be like, they were his first students specifically into school, rather than, this being counted as students, but whatever. That doesn't necessarily mess up with anything. But regardless, I like this group as an idea more because they aren't characters that we know. So ultimately we have, we have the chance to grow with them as their own characters and to possibly think of them as characters who may or may not die very soon. Specifically, because one of them does. Due to them, while that group being Havoc, who we later find out is, like in the comics, Cyclops' brother. Some girl named Angel Salvador, who people thought was Wasp, and she's not Wasp. Similar powers, but not Wasp. We also got Banshee, who's Screamy Fly Boy. He's a really cool comic character that I wish had more time. And of course Darwin, who is in the comics impossibly strong, possibly impossibly strong. And we'll get to what I mean by that later. But while they're hanging out, X and Maggie are going to try and find out where Shaw might be. They kind of infiltrate by doing a weird little mind trick that stops the guys who check the van they're hiding in. from seeing him so they can actually get into where Shaw is and the Russian government he apparently is visiting. Which, of course, in truth, not only is he not there, but it's just Emma Frost. Maggie and X are able to take her down, but they find out through her, I'd assume is kind of letting them know that, in truth, Shaw is just not working with the Russians. He has a super Bond villain type plan, which is very comic booky, which is just let the humans kill themselves, and mutants are going to take over afterwards. And not only that, but they're going to kind of state their intentions to the little mutants. So they come in, they beat the shit out of all of the soldiers in the facility. And Shaw shows up and he's like, hey, what's up? Angel, because she doesn't really have a lot of character in this movie, joins Shaw and she basically just does stuff that Emma Frost could have done for the rest of the movie. I don't know why she's really in this movie. Seemingly our characters try to fight against him, but very quickly they find out that he is incredibly strong and he unfortunately kills Darwin. I have two problems with this. The fact that they have two characters kind of off of the team immediately is a bit weird to me. They probably shouldn't have just had Angel in the movie at all. She's one of my only real problems with this film. She just feels like she takes up time. And if you're gonna get rid of a character from the team to kind of show off how important this guy is and how important it is to take him down, you either should have the one goes to his side or one dies thing, and it's better to not kill off a character for no reason, especially when that character is Darwin. And that's my second problem with this scene, is that Darwin in the comics is impossibly strong. He can adapt to anything. The adaptation isn't necessarily that he can withstand anything, it's more that he can find a way to get out of any situation. Throw him into a volcano, he might now adapt to either the ability to live into a volcano, just be a volcano man, or just teleport away, because now he can do that for a little bit. I guess it's that Shaw puts his energy inside his body that just constantly goes through him enough that he just can't adapt fast enough. It's very unclear how he kills him, but it's weird that he does at all. Honestly, I would prefer them to not kill off Darwin. It would have been really cool to have him do some cool shit in this movie. I guess that would have been too much effects work for the very short production time they had for this film, so alright. But at least kill him off, and not also have Angel fuck off and do nothing for the rest of the movie, really. Despite the fact they probably should let these younger people who honestly are like the same age as Professor X and Magneto, but whatever, they decide to train them to possibly help them stop Shaw and his big plan. We get this really cool training montage, which you might think the transitions are comic book, but a very important about this film is it's very inspired by 60s films in general. Not only are a lot of the shots and transitions very clean because they're not trying to be very actiony and hectic and shaky cam, but they're trying to be more like a traditional film, and this movie is fantastically shot because of that. I love how this movie looks the whole way through. There is no complaint at any of the shots. All of them are clean, well-paced, and the editing's fantastic to show off the exact emotion in each scene. It is fantastic. There is rarely any real continuity issues as well. I don't see one thing in one shot and a different thing in the other. There's a lot of attention paid to these shots, and it's a really great looking film because of that. And this cool editing that they do is a big reference to the 68 movie, the Thomas Crown Affair, and I should say the 68 one, not the 99 one. Get that one out of here. The 68 one, and this movie, and if you watch that movie, you'll really see how exactly that movie inspired this movie in terms of the way that it was shot and its pace, and especially that really cool transition throughout the really cool training montage. This training montage, alongside the montage of them finding the First Class, really shows off all of these characters, not only their personalities, but their powers, how they control them, and especially the relationship between Magneto and Professor X. Not only how they connect and how they relate to each other, but their exact differences, and how they kind of slowly grow to learn that despite how much they really care about each other, they cannot be with each other. Almost like a weird romance? I don't know, they're kinda. But also through that we get Mystique going through her arc again, learning to be more mutiny rather than trying to blend with the humans, and kind of parallel to that is Beast, who throughout this is a regular guy. I wouldn't have casted Nicholas Hoult in this. He's fine, but he's not really Beast to me, at least until later. He's like a tall, skinny, lanky guy, and Beast is more like a short, like, beefy boy even before he was blue, which, of course, Beast in this does become very, very blue in this. He tries to really find a way to possibly semi-cure himself. He says that it won't mess up with their abilities, but give them a better appearance, but, like, he's talking to Mystique with this, and it's just like, but her ability is your appearance, and how do you keep your abilities when your appearance is just like your feet at this point? And your powers are through that. Are you still going to be able to grip things with your regular ass, not monkey feet? I don't understand. Either way, the point is this serum is bullshit, and it turns them super duper blue. Which coincides around the point of them getting the cool new costumes that Beast built for them, which are fantastic looking. Remember that stupid yellow spandex line of, oh, what would you prefer, yellow spandex? It's like, yes I would, these look great. More Kevlar than spandex, but that's not the point. They look like X-Men costumes and look really good. And again, Beast, look at Beast. Beast looks really cool in this. It's not as cool as Kelsey Grammer, but whatever. That's not the point. He looks cool because he's Beast. That's all I care about. And that looks like an X-Men team. And due to the fact that we've built who these characters are, they feel like an X-Men team, and I care about them going through their big final battle there. Which is a very well-paced, very climactic feeling big final action scene. Because it's not just like a bunch of people coming together fighting. The fighting is very interesting. There's lots of up-in-the-air shots for when Banshee's flying around, kind of helping Havoc get away from Angel. Plus Azazel's like teleporting everywhere, and that still looks really cool. Beast is doing some crazy Beast shit. But that's not even the focus. It's all about Professor X and Magneto trying to work together to try and stop Shaw's plan. Not only stopping the Russians and Americans from firing on each other, really getting to see their different mindsets as that's happening, but also the really cool shit that they can do together as they like physically move the whole sub that Shaw is in and then kind of infiltrate it. And it's fantastic to really see Magneto fully transition into who he is. Maggie and Professor X are able to stop Shaw, to kind of like freeze his mind, and when you think Magneto is just gonna get out of there and be the bigger person like he's seemingly about to be, you realize that the whole film he's still been like, I gotta do it, that's what I'm here for, and you just feel this like, fuck. Like, you know it's not going to happen, but because you grow to like these characters, you just feel that you want them to not do this. Like, you want them to be friends. But Magneto kills Shaw with the little coin that Shaw killed Magneto's mom over the fact that Magneto couldn't move it when he was a kid. And well, at first in the beginning of the film, because of that scene of just like, fuck you, why'd you do that? You're rooting for him to find him and to kill him because you want that thing. But when you see these characters grow and learn and to be like, that's not the right way. That's not what your mom would have wanted. You come to the scene that you've kind of been wanting to see the whole time, and you just realize that you don't want it to happen, especially because it's going to totally ruin the relationship of these two characters that you've grown to love in this movie. But because both governments now know about the mutants, they send a whole bunch of fucking rockets which Magneto stops and throws back at them. And there's this kind of like physical but also kind of mental struggle between Magneto and Professor X to make Magneto not do this kind of thing. Eventually ending in Mariah, doing the really only important thing she does throughout the film, which is try and shoot Magneto, which she like deflects and one of them which happens to ricochet into Charles, and that's the single reason why he stopped at all. And through him like holding his injured body, do we really get this great confrontation of them realizing that they're stronger together, but they can't be together. Mystique, after some kind of encouragement from Professor X, leaves with Magneto and Shaw's old Groot to be the beginning of the Brotherhood. God knows what will happen to them as he goes off to find Emma, at the same time as Professor X kind of wipes Mariah's memory of a bit of what happened, so that hopefully the X-Men are never found, so he can find his new school and begin being a cool teacher. Thus setting us up for what we knew in the previous 3-ish movies. Which, due to the fact that Emma Frost could make some, like, like visions for people, and that's kind of what happened. Yeah, and Professor X shows that he also can also can do that kind of thing. Could maybe be the explanation enough to see why he was up and about during X-Men Origins Wolverine. Besides that, this is a really great prequel to the overall series in general. Not only does it give you a real great look into the mindset of these two characters who will later become Ian McKellen and Patrick Stewart, because the actors are perfect at being younger versions of them. But it also sets up a big group of dudes that you really grow to like all as their own whole group. I really like Havoc and Banshee, especially. Lucas Till and Caleb Laudry Jones are really great. They really embed these characters of a funny Irish guy and real big dude bro that kind of has like a soft side to him. These are who they are in the comics. I look at these characters and I go, that's Havoc and that's Banshee. I really like to see them on screen, and I would have loved to see more of them. I wish we did. We'll get to that later. But as they are now, they're really good. Perfectly go into all of the characters. It's not like I fully have learnt who all these characters are or anything, but this is a good beginning to introduce all these characters as who they should definitely be. And they bring all these guys together to develop them together to make them into a great team. That is how you do a team movie. This does it even better than I feel X2 does to bring them together and really feel like a unit. That's what X-Men should do. And with the fantastic, very clean, very subtle, in the best places way that the camera works to be how a well-looking movie should, it feels less like a big, epic action super movie and more like a superhero spy thriller film. And in that way, I really like this film a lot better than the whole previous 4 ones, even more than X2. That as much as I enjoy, it has its problems, that none of which are here in this. Besides not doing some of its characters perfectly, especially wasting our time with Angel and Darwin, I feel like this movie does a lot of things incredibly well. Not only how I would want them to be X-Men, but just a movie in general. This movie is a very emotional movie because you really understand who these characters are by the end of it. Like, you are already ready to see the younger versions of the characters, but to see it in this light is just so interesting because it fully goes to show you what is the emotional core of not only this movie but the whole franchise is these two guys. They make the movie. It is an X-Men movie. Like, it is a team movie about the group, but it's fine that they don't fully go into them, even though I would have wanted a little bit more of that, because the movie is more about these two characters and their relationship. Like, you find that perfectly fine. That you don't see as much as of Havoc in... Like, you find it perfectly fine that there isn't as much Havoc and Banshee because you just want to see more of Magneto and Professor X. They are fantastic. One is just very raw and emotional, and the other one's very calm and caring, and they perfectly match each other so very well. The villains are a slight point of contention. Kevin Bacon is fantastic as like a sort of proto-Magneto, kind of giving us the reason why Magneto is the way he is, and in that way, I'm perfectly fine with him not being the deepest villain of all time. He has a presence, and he is the, like, starting fire to the firecracker that is Magneto. A reason and fault that basically everything in this franchise is the way that it eventually goes. More or less. His henchmen I'm fine with not being too deep. I just like the idea of henchmen being a thing. They have cool powers. That's all they really need to be, honestly. Just have them there do a cool fight. You don't need to be all that deep as long as the main villain is at least entertaining and has a point in the plot. And hey, Kevin Bacon's really cool, so what are you gonna do? Again though, Emma Frost probably could have been a little bit more. I would have loved that if at the end of the film she was the real main villain. I really wish that they did more with her, but again, we'll get more into what these characters eventually do later in the series. And you know what? Every single person in this movie is really, really good. Every actor. Even the bit characters. They brought fucking Michael Ironside to be one of the generals in the American side of that little final confrontation, which, by the way, this is like the 4th time I've mentioned Michael Ironside in my reviews in general. That's weird. But at least this movie's a good movie this time, and is a fantastic movie, because again, Vaughn really knows how to bring the best out of all of these actors. All these actors try their absolute hardest regardless, because these are some fantastic actors that are rarely anything bad, but even in the movies, even in later movies of the same franchise, they have definitely been shown to maybe not care as much, to just kind of half-ass it, but they do not. They try their absolute hardest, and I feel it's not only because these actors are all really, really good, but because the director knows how to really pull the emotion and the effort from these people. And he needed to, because this movie, despite looking really good, had a very short production time. They tried to rush this out as fast as they could, and it really goes to show you that rushing production can definitely result in maybe iffy films, but if you have the right people with the right amount of effort really trying their absolute hardest, you can make a fantastic film despite the time that you have, or haven't. Though Vaughn brought Miller and Stentz from his previous film Thor, it's very clear that they had a much bigger love about X-Men, and it's especially very clear that Vaughn and Goodman are the real heart towards these characters. They really wanted to do a really good job at making this a very enjoyable, lovable film that fit into the X-Men movies, but also was more of an X-Men movie. It felt like what X-Men should feel like. And giving it this cool 60s vibe especially helped into that to make things make more sense on why they're a little bit younger and goofier, and why they have the yellow spandex suits, you know? And with the fact that, as I mentioned, Vaughn was going to do 3 and then couldn't, this was clear that this was a work of definite passion and want to make a good movie, and not just to make a movie. I mean, I guess you could have had more action, but would you really wanted it? It's more about the characters, and it's more of a subtle thriller. They could have focused more on some of the other issues that were happening in the 60s, but those aren't really important to the more spy thriller aspects of to try and stop the Cold War. And again, as I mentioned, not every character is built up perfectly, but you don't really need every character to be the biggest thing ever when you have the more important characters built up as well as they are. I have very little bad to say about the camera work, because again, I've mentioned it's fucking fantastic. It's very similar to a movie that came out at around the same time, a more grounded, realistic approach to superheroes that was really needed at the time. You know, Batman Begins. Well, that's a movie I'll probably talk about eventually. For now, I'm gonna fucking say that X-Men First Class is absolutely well done. It's fantastic. What else? What bad can I'm trying to pull from this. Like, what bad can there be? The best X-Men film, and probably one of the best superhero films in general. You know, besides the other best X-Men film. We'll get to that eventually, but until then, we have another Wolverine-based movie that we'll get to next time, being just The Wolverine. Another try to give Wolverine a more solo story that will be a little bit better than last time. I should mention Hugh Jackman was in a little bit part and probably the funniest little cameo of the whole franchise. It's absolutely hilarious, but we'll get much more of Hugh Jackman next time when he is the only character in it, basically. Until then, I've been the Movie-a-thoner. I hope you enjoyed the review. I really, really enjoyed this movie, so if you also like First Class, then leave favorite parts about it in the comments, and possibly other stuff that I may have forgotten, or any bad parts that I probably should have brought up. Again, it's really only that Darwin dies. That's about it. But more importantly, stay good, stay safe, don't be an asshole.